I want you to just take a second and picture your absolute favorite cinematic masterpiece. You know the one.
Oh, yeah. Everyone has that one movie.
Right. That movie that just completely transports you, where you literally forget you're even sitting on a couch.
You're just totally immersed.
Exactly. The lighting is perfect. The mood is heavy. The motion just feels, I don't know, inherently right. It feels like an undeniable kind of magic. But here's the secret that completely blew my mind today.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Yeah, that magic, it's actually a highly calculated, like almost ruthless combination of optical illusions, bizarre mathematical fractions, and entirely deliberate imperfections.
It's basically a beautifully engineered trick played directly on your brain.
100%. It's a trick.
And it is a trick that filmmakers have been, perfecting for over a century now. Every single time you feel immersed in a totally different world, you are actually being manipulated by a very specific set of physical and mathematical rules.
Which is exactly what we're going to decode today on this deep dive.
It's going to be a fun one.
It really is. So we're opening up a pretty fascinating stack of sources today. I've got cinematography textbooks, some incredibly detailed technical breakdowns from Wikipedia on video formats, and lighting guides from No Film School in Canon.
A lot of heavy reading.
Oh, yeah, definitely. But the mission here is to figure out exactly how filmmakers use physics and light to manipulate your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at the visual language of cinema.
Right, the visual language.
To understand why specific frame rates, the physical glass on the camera, and techniques like chiaroscuro lighting are the secret ingredients of that cinematic trick.
And we won't just be rattling off a list of technical specifications from these sources, I promise.
Yeah, no one wants a dry textbook reading.
Exactly. We are going to dig into why these technical choices actually matter to your emotional experience as a viewer. Because ultimately, every single technical decision on a film set, from the frame rate to the shape of the lens, is an emotional decision. It's so true. So let's start with the absolute foundation of that cinematic look, which is what dictates how we experience the passage of time in a movie, the frame rate.
The holy grail of film.
Right. Specifically, the gold standard of filmmaking, which is 24p.
Yep, 24p.
That stands for 24 progressive frames per second. And for a long time, video broadcasts, like the news, were historically shot at 30 frames per second, or 60 interlaced fields.
Which is a whole different beast.
It is. But film has clung fiercely to 24 frames per second for nearly 100 years. Now, the sources point out that 24p has this distinct impressionistic feel. But, why is less data somehow better for a movie?
Well, because 24 frames per second isn't quite fast enough to perfectly mimic reality.
Okay.
It possesses a slight stutter, a really subtle motion blur. It deliberately does not show you every single microscopic detail of movement.
It's like it hides the seams a little bit.
Precisely. And we have a perfect modern example from our sources of what happens when you try to mess with that formula. Consider Peter Jackson's film The Hobbit.
Oh boy, here we go. Yeah. He made the highly controversial decision to shoot it at 48 frames per second.
Which is double the standard.
Right, double the standard frame rate, meaning double the visual information hitting your eyes every single second.
And audiences absolutely lost their minds over it. And not in a good way either.
No, not at all. People were genuinely upset, and the common complaint was that the movie looked, quote, too real.
Too real, which is so weird for a fantasy movie.
Exactly. It looks like a soap opera or like a live sports broadcast. Because there was just so much visual data, the actual illusion of cinema broke down. The human brain was suddenly processing every single edge detail.
So, like, the majestic sets just look like wood and styrofoam.
Yes. The magical character prosthetics just looked like heavy latex makeup glued to an actor's face. It completely shattered the fantasy.
Okay, let's unpack this, because it sounds totally counterintuitive. You would think more data, more frames, more realism would automatically be better for storytelling, right?
You'd think so, logically.
But it's actually like reading a great novel versus reading a dry court transcript. A novel leaves just enough visual gaps for your imagination to step in and, fill in the blanks.
Oh, that's a really good analogy.
Thanks. You're actively participating in creating the illusion in your mind, whereas 48 frames per second is just cold, hyper-realistic data. It leaves literally no room for your brain to dream.
It robs the viewer of their imagination entirely. The imperfection of that motion blur is the feature. It is not the bug.
Right.
But what's fascinating here is that the persistence of 24p isn't purely some artistic crusade.
Wait, really? It's not just directors being artsy?
Not entirely. The sources, quote a video standard expert named Charles Poynton, and he points out that 24 frames per second is actually uniquely suited for international distribution.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was a mathematical sweet spot that was essential in the analog age. It can easily adapt to both 50 Hz broadcasting systems, which are used across Europe, and the 59.94 Hz systems used in North America.
So it's basically the lowest common denominator that works everywhere.
Pretty much. If early filmmakers had arbitrarily chosen, say, 26 frames or 22 frames, sharing movies globally would have been nearly impossible for decades.
Wow. So it's this beautiful accident where the artistic preference perfectly aligned with global commerce.
Exactly.
But, and this is a big but while 24p is an artistic dream on a massive theater screen, trying to force it onto televisions, designed for totally different frame rates, created a massive mathematical nightmare for the industry.
Oh, an absolute nightmare.
Which takes us from the ideal of 24p straight into the absolute gymnastics required to get these movies into your living room.
The dreaded pull down.
And the pull down.
This is where the math gets incredibly complicated.
So let's talk about the battle of PL and NTSC. So you have a movie shot at 24 frames per second, and you want to put it on a television set. In PL regions, which covers mostly Europe and parts of Asia, the TV runs at 25 frames per second.
Right.
The math here is surprisingly easy. You just speed the footage up by about 4.1%.
Meaning the movie actually finishes slightly faster than it did when it played in the theater.
Which is wild to think about. And the audio pitch goes up by exactly 0.707 of a semitone.
Right, the pitch shift.
And the sources note that the viewer almost never notices this. Maybe a voice sounds a tiny bit higher, but it's completely negligible. But for NTSC regions, like North America, it is a completely different story.
And much more brutal story.
Yeah.
Because NTSC televisions historically run at 60 interlaced fields per second.
Hang on. 60 interlaced fields. I hear the word interlaced, and I just think of shoelaces. What does that actually mean for the image on an old TV?
Okay, so think about how an old CRT tube television physically works.
Like the big heavy boxes.
Yeah, the huge heavy ones. It doesn't flash a complete picture all at once. An electron gun in the back of the TV literally draws the image line by horizontal line on the glass.
Okay, drawing it out.
But instead of drawing from top to bottom like lines 1, 2, 3, 4, it draws every other line. It draws lines 1, 3, 5, 7 all the way down the screen.
Wait, it skips every even line?
Exactly. And that pass is called one field. Then the gun shoots back up to the top and draws the even lines 2, 4, 6, 8. That is the second field.
Oh, I see.
And those two interlaced fields lock together rapidly to trick your eye into seeing one full frame.
So NTSC are showing 60 of these half pictures or fields every single second.
Correct.
But our beautiful cinematic movie only has 24 full progressive frames.
Yeah.
How on earth do you fit 24 into 60 evenly?
Well, you don't.
You don't?
No. To solve this, the industry had to invent the 3.2 pull-down.
Okay, lay it on me.
Imagine trying to fit a 24-piece puzzle into a 60-piece grid. You have to literally take a pair of scissors, cut some puzzle pieces in half, and stretch them out to fill the gaps.
That sounds destructive.
It is. To pad those 24 frames into 60 fields, the system actually splits the film frames apart. It takes the first film frame and turns it into 2 fields. Great.
Almost so far.
But then it takes the second film frame and holds it on screen long enough to become 3 fields.
Oh, weird.
Then the next frame gets 2 fields again. The next gets 3. It creates this endless 2, 3, 2, 3 pattern.
Wait, you're telling me that for decades, every time I watched a movie on cable TV, the frames were being chopped up and held on screen for uneven amounts of time?
Yes, exactly.
How did I never notice a massive, violent stutter during, like, a fast car chase or a camera pan?
Because your brain is an incredible adaptation machine.
Wow.
It does cause distinct motion artifacts, a very rhythmic stutter called judder. But because you grew up watching movies on TV with this exact mathematical conversion playing out 60 times a second, your brain just learned to filter it out.
It just accepted it as the normal rhythm of television.
Exactly. You became completely accustomed to it. But for video editors trying to work with this footage digitally on computers, it was an absolute nightmare.
Oh, I bet.
Because of those blended 3-field frames.
Right, because a computer doesn't want interlaced fields. It wants clean, whole, progressive frames.
Oh, so
how did they fix it for digital editing?
Well, camera makers had to introduce a new mathematical hack. Specifically, Panasonic, with their AGD VX100 camera back in, I think, 2002, they introduced something called the advanced pull-down, or the 2.3.3.2 pull-down.
That is a lot of numbers.
Yeah. Instead of an alternating 2-3-2-3 pattern, They padded the 24 frames into a 2, then 3, then 3, then 2 pattern.
Okay, if your head is spinning right now from those numbers, you are not alone.
Yeah.
Why change the pattern to something even more convoluted?
Because this new pattern creates a very predictable chunk of 5 video frames. And the genius of this specific arrangement is that the weird spliced-together Frankenstein frame, the one containing fields from 2 totally different moments in time, is always the 5th one in the sequence.
Ah, okay, I get it. So the digital editing software can look at that chunk of 5, say, there's the ugly 5th frame, and automatically throw it in the trash.
Exactly. It just dumps it.
Instantly restoring the pristine original 24 frames for the editor to work with.
Precisely. It was a massive breakthrough for digital filmmaking.
That is brilliant.
It was. But our sources mention a huge catch with this. This 2.3.3.2 pattern was purely designed for computers to dismantle.
Oh, so you shouldn't just watch it like that.
Right. If you try to actually sit back and watch a raw 2.3.3.2 feed on a monitor, the stutter is heavily exaggerated.
Yikes.
Because those frames that are stretched into 3 fields are now playing back-to-back in the middle of the pattern, the stutter goes from a subtle rhythm to a really jarring, unwatchable hiccup.
So 24p dictates how we experience the passage of time in a movie and how that rhythm is mathematically carved up for different screens. But time is only half the equation, right?
Yeah.
The other half is how we perceive physical space. And that is entirely hijacked by the physical glass attached to the front of the camera.
The lenses. They are literally the physical eye of the cinema.
Our sources break this down into 2 main classes, spherical and anamorphic.
Right.
So spherical lenses are essentially your default. They project the image onto the camera sensor exactly as it looks in reality.
Without any real distortion.
Yeah. They don't change the aspect ratio. And the sources note they're generally fast lenses, which means they let in a lot of light, making them great for dark, low-light shooting.
Super practical.
Exactly. They produce incredibly sharp images, and the out-of-focus elements in the background, which is called bokeh, are perfectly circular.
Like little glowing orbs.
Right. And the example the textbook uses is Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life, which was shot on spherical ARRI and Zeiss master primes.
Oh, gorgeous film. And it creates a very naturalistic, sharp but intimate feel. It mimics how our own human eyes naturally perceive the world. Uncompressed and totally clear.
But then we have anamorphic lenses.
Yes, the heavy hitters.
And reading through the sources, I have to be honest, anamorphic lenses sound like an absolute nightmare to work with.
They kind of are.
Right. Like they're notoriously expensive. They have a shallower depth of field. They physically squeeze a super wide image onto a standard frame, which means you have to digitally or optically stretch it back out later just to make it look normal.
Yeah, it's a whole process.
They distort the edges of the image. They are softer, meaning less sharp, and they are slow lenses, so they require way more light on set. Why would any filmmaker go out of their way to use a tool that seems objectively harder and worse in almost every metric?
Because in art, perfection is often terribly boring.
Okay, fair point.
Those exact flaws you just listed are exactly what filmmakers are paying a premium for. An anamorphic lens fundamentally alters reality in a way that feels inherently mythological.
Mythological, I like that word.
To understand why, you really have to look at how they work. An anamorphic lens literally has a cylindrical element inside of it.
Okay.
Imagine looking at the world through a glass water bottle. It physically squeezes a wide panoramic field of view and squishes it onto a standard square piece of film.
So it allows them to capture a massive 2.35.1 or 2.39.1 aspect ratio, that classic sweeping ultra-wide rectangle we all associate with movies, without having to crop away the top and bottom of their film negative.
Right.
You get to keep all the high resolution. It's just squished.
Yes, and when you stretch it back out for the theater projector, you get that epic widescreen feel. But it is much more than just the shape of the frame.
What else does it do?
Because that cylindrical glass is physically squeezing the image, it completely changes how the lens renders out-of-focus light. Remember how spherical lenses have circular bokeh?
Yeah, the little orbs.
Well, anamorphic lenses produce that iconic stretched oval-shaped bokeh in the background. And when a bright light hits that cylindrical glass element, instead of just a localized glare, you get those dramatic horizontal lens flares stretching all the way across the screen.
Like literally every J.J. Abrams movie.
Yes.
The blue flares cutting across the entire frame.
Exactly. Or, looking at the textbook's prime example, Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood.
Oh, incredible cinematography.
Shot on Panavision anamorphic lenses. Think about the scenes where the oil derrick is burning in the background.
Yeah.
The anamorphic lens renders that fire with a softness around the edges, the oval bokeh, the subtle stretching of the light. It makes the image feel slightly detached from reality.
It's almost dreamlike.
It is. It adds an intense emotional tension. It visually tells your brain you are watching a grand historical myth, not a dry documentary.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. You mentioned that anamorphic lenses are slow, meaning they naturally let in less light, right? And they have a shallower depth of field, meaning less of the image is perfectly in focus from front to back. Because of that, you really have to flood the film set with intense illumination just to get a usable exposure.
You need huge lights.
Which perfectly transitions us from the physical space of the camera into how you paint that space with light.
And lighting is arguably the most powerful psychological tool a cinematographer has. It directs your eye and sets the emotional temperature of the entire film.
Now, the sources establish a baseline here, which is the three-point lighting setup. It's exactly what it sounds like. You have a key light, which is your main source of illumination.
The brightest one.
Right. Then you have a fill light placed on the opposite side to soften the shadows created by the key. And you have a backlight, or a kicker, to separate your subject from the background.
Right, it creates a rim of light around them.
Exactly. It gives a flat two-dimensional image a feeling of three-dimensional shape. It's clean, it's visible, and it's entirely safe.
It's the standard for news broadcasts and corporate interviews. But safe doesn't tell a compelling narrative story.
No, it doesn't.
This is where the visual textbook introduces a concept called chiaroscuro. It is an Italian term that literally translates to light and shadow. And this is where lighting goes from basic exposure to an emotional weapon.
The sources dive deeply into the film noir movement in the 1940s and 50s to illustrate this, which is so cool.
I love film noir.
Sam. And the textbook points out that these movies were made right after World War II. And the cinematographers didn't just use heavy, hard light and deep, impenetrable shadows, what we call low-key lighting, just to look cool.
That wasn't just a style choice.
No, it was a visual reflection of the post-war zeitgeist, the profound societal anxiety of the time.
The absolute moral ambiguity of that era. In film noir, you often see a detective or a femme fatale lit perfectly in half. One side of their face is brightly illuminated, and the other side falls completely into black shadow. That is not just a stylistic choice, it is a physical, visual representation of their internal